topic of whether or not Final Fantasy should return back to its turn-based roots when looking at the mainline AAA entries for the franchise has been at the core of Square Enix conversation ever since Square Enix started to introduce more real-time combat systems into these bigger Final Fantasy titles, looking at Final Fantasy 15, 16, and the 7 Remake trilogy. A lot of people want this, and especially since turn-based has been stepping back into the limelight over the past few years. Atlus are still doing what they did best all of those years ago, and still to this day, they are incredibly successful. It shouldn't be confused that turn-based is a dying genre like a lot of people are led to believe. A lot of people say that the reason why we're not seeing that many games in this genre nowadays is simply because there is less interest, or that they don't make as much money. But it's funny because here in 2025, you have a game like this one come through and it blows your absolute socks off. This has come from a first-time studio, Sandfall, and has been making an absolute name for itself, coming from a relatively small studio of only about 30 people. Right now, currently, this has a pretty good chance of winning Game of the Year. Now, I do intend to play this. I mean, obviously, I'm holding a physical copy, though I haven't gotten around to it just yet. But it's funny because this is a full-blown turn-based game, yet you've got a lot of people that aren't usually into this genre saying that this is perhaps one of the best video game experiences, not just video game experiences, but media experiences they've ever witnessed. I've even had friends of mine that don't play JRPGs, action RPGs, any of that sort. I'm talking basic bread and butter gamers, people that play Minecraft or people that play Call of Duty, that have played Expedition 33 because they're hearing about how good it is, and they've come to me saying, you need to play this. This is amazing. While turn-based has still remained to be quite a popular genre, there is going to be a snowball effect from this game right here. And recently, Square Enix held a meeting with their investors, and at that meeting, a Twitter user that goes by the name of Yuz, who is a known investor reporter, was there at this meeting. Now, he wanted to ask Square Enix the grand and age-old question of, will Final Fantasy return back to its turn-based roots, especially after all of the success the genre has been seeing over the past few years? He mentioned here, I expressed the opinion that I would like new releases of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy to alternate. The reason is that I agree with the shift from quantity to quality in the medium-term business plan. On the other hand, I explained by citing the example of former President Wada, under whom Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest titles were not released for a long time due to an obsession with quality, and the example of previous President Matsuda, who released too many low-quality games as a result of prioritizing quantity. I mentioned that prolonged development makes it difficult to attract fans, and if development costs become too heavy due to extended timelines, even new Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy titles may fail to generate profits. Therefore, a balance between quality and quantity is essential. Above all, I emphasize the need to release flagship titles Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy every year. Additionally, I expressed the desire for new Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy titles to be command-based RPGs, explaining this by referencing the shift in direction with Final Fantasy 16 and the success of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which gained attention in 2025. The response was that the next 3 years of medium-term plan will focus on delivering truly interesting games to the users. However, beyond that, they plan to deliver many titles, including mid-tier ones, and are preparing for this, so they ask us to wait for announcements. Regarding command-based RPGs, they are aware of Expedition 33 and consider command-based RPGs to be Square Enix's origin and foundation. They value the turn-based genre and plan to continue delivering games in this style in the future. So that's a lot to take in, but some very interesting stuff. It's awesome this guy had the opportunity to pretty much ask Square Enix, do they still have interest in the genre, and whether or not the Final Fantasy mainline titles could potentially return back to turn-based. It's great that Square Enix are acknowledging, hey, look, we like turn-based, we understand it's a big part of the essence of Square Enix. It shouldn't be confused though, it's not like Square Enix have totally ditched this genre at all. We still have many different games releasing from Square that are turn-based. I mean, if we look at like Octopath Traveler, in 2023 it received a sequel due to the success of the first game. We've got the Bravely series, Romancing Saga, Triangle Strategy, and of course, Dragon Quest. Though, we've got no idea what's going on with Dragon Quest XII. The turn-based games are still very much being produced by Square Enix. The issue here, and I think this is where the problem lies, for those who are interested in Square turn-based games, is that Square don't really put big budgets onto their turn-based RPGs, unless of course we're looking at Dragon Quest. So this is why so many people are highly anticipating number 12, is because this will be an opportunity to receive a AAA turn-based title from Square. The mainline Final Fantasy games are in an interesting position at the moment. There hasn't really been a hugely or wildly successful Final Fantasy title in a little while. Now, believe it or not, Final Fantasy 15 was actually pretty successful. It sold around about 10 million copies total as of right now. Now remember that that game released simultaneously back in 2016 on both Xbox and PlayStation, with a PC follow-up about a year later. The game being multi-platform day one on release certainly helped its sales, though of course we know that the bulk of those sales would have been from PlayStation users. But we also have to think that Final Fantasy 15, how it started as Versus 13, had an incredibly long marketing cycle, as the game was first revealed back in 2006 under the name of Versus 13. So this was a game that was waited on for an incredibly long time, about a decade. Of course, when the game came out, there were mixed opinions on it. Some to this day now love the game. Personally, I really enjoy 15, though it does have some glaring issues, but others absolutely despise it. It's sort of a love it or hate it type situation. 15, though, was the first mainline Final Fantasy game to sport an action-orientated real-time combat system, though its combat system is, interesting. Not exactly full-blown real-time, if that makes sense. It's an interesting combat system. 16 then came along many years later and sported more of a hack-and-slash Devil May Cry inspired combat system. And the success of this game, yeah, interesting. We know that the game has sold around about 3.5 million copies since 2023. It launched exclusively on PlayStation 5 with a PC follow-up about just over a year later. The game has now since arrived on Xbox, and there are rumblings of a potential Switch 2 port. I personally love 16, but again, it's a love it or hate it type situation. Many people actually didn't enjoy this Final Fantasy title. My personal issues with this is it does hard lack some RPG elements, which just isn't really Final Fantasy. I would agree though that Final Fantasy is sort of in this interesting, not full-blown identity crisis, but more so in a position where it is needing almost a complete reinvention to recapture the mass attention it once used to have. And returning back to the turn-based roots, especially with examples of great turn-based games with modernizations applied to them, like Expedition 33, could benefit the Final Fantasy franchise massively. For me, I really like the new real-time approach to the Final Fantasy games. This is my opinion, of course, because I've got more interest in real-time action-related combat systems. But I can totally understand the want and possibly even the need for this franchise to return back to its turn-based roots when looking at the mainline games. It's important to keep in mind though too that Square Enix seem to have some pretty crazy expectations when looking at their big Final Fantasy games, because we know that they have publicly stated that both 16 and even 7 Rebirth have underperformed in the eyes of the company. The sales figures that these games have pulled aren't necessarily huge if we're taking into account the budget that was spent developing them. I really do think that the sales figures, both 7 Remake and 16, largely contribute to Square Enix's decision to drop console exclusivity and start focusing on multi-platform releases. Now do keep in mind, this is not Square Enix confirming that Final Fantasy 17 is going to be a turn-based game. For all we know, the Final Fantasy games might continue to be real-time action games. I've been saying this for a while though, I think Final Fantasy 17 should absolutely pick up 7's combat system. The combat system of the 7 Remake is simply fantastic, totally unique, a nice blend of action systems with some sprinkles of strategy-related aspects, or even harkening back to turn-based aspects kind of integrated into it. It is such a cool modern take on Final Fantasy, if not the best. I really like how this investor reporter emphasized that the company really needs to focus on both quality and quantity. In case you don't know though, Square Enix did announce that this is the new direction that the company is basically going in as part of their reboot and reawakened business plan that started last year. This new business plan is to ensure that we're not seeing these long dragged out, prolonged development cycles that we've been so used to over the past decade, if not even longer. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 is another prime example of a development process that was basically in development hell for the longest time. And I think the new president, Takashi, has kind of stepped in to say, enough is enough, we need to rethink, we need to reorganize. I do like the mention here from Square saying how the next 3 years, while we are currently in the reboot phase, which will last all the way up until about March of 2027, is still going to provide content. This needs to be reiterated because a lot of people are taking the new business plan as, oh, so the next sort of 3 years is going to be quiet for the company. Yeah, it's going to be quieter than normal, but it's still going to contain content. As they mention here, that the next 3 years of the medium-term plan will focus on delivering truly interesting games to the users. But we can expect a pickup in the quantity of titles, with hopefully quality being maintained once the 3-year plan has come to an end, which will begin in 2027 and move onwards. Right now, Square Enix are trying to figure out a way of getting consistency down on pat for all of their key IPs. Obviously, we see Final Fantasy releasing like all the time. There's generally a new Final Fantasy entry every single year, with every other odd year containing a major release for that franchise. So that's not really too much of a problem. It's interesting here that the investor reporter is mentioning like he expects Square to release a Final Fantasy game every single year. We're kind of receiving Final Fantasy every single year. But yeah, Dragon Quest and Kingdom Hearts, especially over the past decade, things have been quiet, and that's something that absolutely needs to change. And so I do hope with this new business plan that they can finally start getting consistency down with these two other major franchises of the company. We're all aware that Kingdom Hearts has some like major issues when it comes to its development process. We just recently got a game that had been in development since around 2019 that got cancelled because the team determined that they weren't going to be able to sustain interesting enough content to maintain the attention of the player, which is really, really bad business. Like, that is insane business to pretty much fund a team to work on one game for beyond that of 5 years, and for that to just then end up cancelled is really bad business ethics. Like, truly bad business ethics. I think, though, it was a case where Square kind of looked at it and thought, this is not going to be profitable. We need to cut ties now and basically just redirect that team to helping out the main Kingdom Hearts team to get the game that actually matters out onto the shelves. But even looking at Kingdom Hearts 4, there appears to be some problems there because, number one, they announced that game way too early, and it really just seems like they wanted people to know that it was in development to provide something there for the 20th anniversary. But the fact that we still haven't seen anything substantial to do with the game since is concerning, and I will genuinely be worried about the development of this title if we haven't seen a trailer for the game by the end of this year, and if the game isn't releasing in 2026. AAA game development should really only take anywhere from 4 to 5 years. Considering that Kingdom Hearts 4 started development early 2020 means that we are coming up to a 6-year development period. My expectation would be for the game to drop at the end of 2026, meaning that we'd be well and truly into the 6th year of development, if not getting closer to the 7th by the time the game releases, if that is what they plan to do. If we're looking at a 2027 release, that is such a long development period. And it tells me that, at least looking at the Kingdom Hearts team, and will also be the same case for the Dragon Quest team working on Dragon Quest 12, there are some serious issues when it comes to the organization and to the efficiency of these teams at Square. Hopefully something that will change with the new business plan in place, with most of these issues hopefully resolved starting in 2027. I'm excited to see what this business plan is going to entail for the company looking into the future, but for right now, we're still just going to have to remain patient to see exactly the results of these changes. I think though, because Final Fantasy is in a position where it does need a reinvention of some kind, that we might potentially end up seeing turn-based returning for the mainline entries, especially now that Square Enix are actually aware and have acknowledged the success of this genre. However, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. Be sure to slap that like button and subscribe to the channel. A big thank you to my wonderful patrons. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.